Well, hello there. This is Thomas Benner, and welcome. I'm going to be going over Adobe After Effects and getting started with After Effects. So, in Adobe After Effects, we create what are known as projects. The file has an AEP suffix, an Adobe After Effects project. And let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is I want to bring in my assets, known as footage, in Adobe After Effects. So I'm going to go to the File menu and choose Import File. Then I've prepared this footage. You can see I've got all sorts of things in here. I've got a WAV file, that's audio. A MOV file, that's a video, moving graphics. Drums is audio, it's a WAV file. I have an Adobe Illustrator file, a couple of them. I've got an MP3 audio file, a layered PSD file, a couple of JPEGs, and a layered PSD file. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in everything except the Illustrator and the PSD files. I'm going to bring them in as footage. You'll see why in a minute. I'm going to bring these in separately. At this point, I could create a composition. I'm going to choose not to because I'm going to show you a simple workflow for getting started with After Effects. Click Open. And all of these assets known as footage are brought into the Projects panel. Now, it's important to understand that none of your assets, your footage, is embedded in your Adobe After Effects file. All of these reference or link to the files on your hard drive. So best practice is to keep all your assets together on your hard drive. If you should rename or move an asset, then Adobe After Effects would lose track of it, wouldn't be able to reference it, and that's why up here in the search field we have options for missing footage, missing fonts, missing effects. You would choose missing footage. It would show you the footage that has lost the link to, and then you would relink to your footage or delete it if you didn't need it. Let's bring in our other files. Choose Import File once again. This time I'm going to bring in my AI files, Adobe Illustrator files. And instead of as footage, I'm going to bring them in as a composition. So they're brought in with all their layers intact. There you can see there's my Mondays file. And if I toggle open this folder, you can see the layer in there for that file. There's also Splash Waters and AI file. And you can see all the layers that are in there for this Adobe Illustrator file. If I choose to, I could bring in these layers individually into my project. Or I could bring in the entire composition as a whole by dragging in Splash Water there. Let's bring in our PSD files. File Import, File. And I'm going to choose my PSD files. Same as with Illustrator. I'm going to bring them as a composition so that they come in as layered files. I had my folder open. I'm glad I actually made this mistake. So all my tequila and watch footage came into that folder. It's not actually where I want it. So I'm going to drag them outside that folder and have them out here in the Loosen the Projects panel. There we go. Sometimes I'm glad I make those mistakes because I get a chance to show you how to fix them. So now I've got all my assets known as footage in Adobe After Effects. I've got static graphics, I've got moving graphics, I've got layered vector Illustrator files, layered Photoshop files, and then I've also got raster JPEGs, which are static images. Along with my moving files and my audio files, let's go ahead and select all of this content. Now, I don't need to bring in the individual layers, so I'm going to deselect the layers folders. Some projects I might want to separate out the layers and put them at different points in my composition. Not today. I'm just going to bring in the Photoshop and Illustrator files as composites and drag these down into the timeline panel on the left side, what's known as the layers section. That opens up the new composition from selection dialog window. So I'm creating a composition this way by dragging my footage into the layers section. I'm going to use the duration of one of my photo. Let's choose one of my move files. Of course, I can always change the duration once it's created as well. Sorry, it's being a little bit wonky today for me. There we go. Choose the move file. Now I don't want the Illustrator file, I want that move file. There it goes. So I'm going to use that QuickTime movie file. The length of that will be the duration of my composition. I'm going to click OK. And now I've created a composition. Now it's got this strange name. I would probably rename the composition. And go File. Save as. Excuse me. And I would give it a name and save it whatever folder I wanted to save it to. Alright, last thing I want to do before I close out here is quickly cover the interface. Right now I'm in the standard workspace. There's also a default, a small screen, libraries. There are other workspaces listed under this double arrow. If you press on it, you'll see all those other workspaces. You can also get to your workspaces from the menu bar, should you choose to do so. In the upper left corner, we have our tool panel. These are all of our tools for working with the elements in my composition. I could add shapes, I could add text, could do various things to affect the elements in the composition with these tools. This is my projects panel I talked about earlier. This has all the footage or assets that are being used in my project. To the right of it, we have the composition window, which shows me my composition. You can think of this as being a preview window. On the far right, excuse me, we have panels. First at the top, we have our info and audio panels. Below that, we have, let's get out of that. We have our preview panel with our play and other play buttons. Below that, we have our effects and presets panel, which contains hundreds of effects and presets that ship with Adobe After Effects ready for you to use. If you know the name of the presets you want, you could click in the search area. You might type in blur, for example, and it would bring up all the blur effects that ship with Illustrator. Down below at the bottom, we have our timeline panel. On the left, we have our layers panel, which is all of our elements arranged spatially. Excuse me. The order of the layers here determine what's in front and what's behind, or what's on top and what's at the bottom in my composition. So this is the stacking orders, the arrangement on the z-axis. On each individual layer, you can drag items to the left or right. That would be moving them on the x-axis, or up and down, which would be moving them on the y-axis. So the layers panel controls the arrangement of your content spatially on the X, Y, and Z axis. You can see there are lots of controls over here with information that's for a later time, but there are many things you can do in this layers section of the timeline panel. On the right of the timeline panel, we have the time graph. And each of my layers is represented here, and it's shown where it is on the time graph. At the top, this blue, looks like a guitar pick, is the CTI, the current time indicator. You would press and drag that to different points on the timeline, and in the composition panel you could see the preview of how your content would appear at that point in time. So those are all the different elements of your interface, your workspace. Today we covered how to import or bring in your assets, your footage for your After Effects project. And I showed you a simple workflow for creating a new composition, which is simply to drag your footage that you're going to use into the Layers section of the timeline panel, and that will open up the new composition dialog window, and you can configure it as you wish, and you're good to go. That's it.